Close your eyes and breathe slowly as the world outside grows soft and distant. Above the hush of night, where clouds drift like gentle ships across an ink-blue sea, there is an island that floats between the stars and the earth. Its cliffs hold waterfalls that sing the same quiet song night after night. Its trees bend with the memory of wind, and at its heart rests a jewel that glows with a patient green light. This is Angel Island, and its light keeps balance where the world needs balance most. On that island lives a guardian. He is Knuckles the Echidna, strong of hand and steady of heart, whose life is wrapped around the duty of watching and keeping. He does not rush. He does not boast. He is a quiet presence, firm as a stone and soft as moss, who has learned the long language of patience. He walks the paths he knows by touch, listens to the whispers of leaves, and lingers by the temple steps where the Master Emerald rests. Tonight, let the story begin as a slow tide. We will move through his days and nights like a warm hand across your forehead, tracing the slow shapes of his life. We will meet the echoes of an ancient tribe, the laughter of unexpected friends, the shadows of old enemies, and the small, gentle moments that make a guardian's heart. Each chapter will unfurl not as a rush of events, but as a careful unspooling, a bedtime tale told with the kindness of dusk. Imagine the emerald's glow, a soft lamp in the hush, bathing stone and leaf in a color that soothes. Imagine the sound of distant waterfalls folding into the dark. Imagine Knuckles seated before the shrine, palms resting on the cool rim of the jewel, listening to a song that has lived longer than most memories. He keeps watch so others may sleep. He tends the balance so that laughter may continue in the valleys below, and children may dream without fear. In this tale, there is courage that does not shout. There is loyalty that does not demand praise. There is the slow healing of mistakes and the gentle forming of friendships. You will hear of races run beneath star-slick skies, of machines that roar and crumble, of quiet confessions whispered by cliff-light. And always, through each image, the tone will be steady and soft, like a lullaby told by an old friend. So settle in, breathe out, and let the island's hush descend. Let your thoughts become small and simple, like pebbles dropping into a calm pool. As we begin, allow the sound of my words to move like a warm current, guiding your mind toward rest. The world can wait. The island keeps watch. Tonight, listen to the slow story of Knuckles the Guardian, whose strength holds an emerald's glow, and whose quiet duty keeps the world in balance. Now breathe deeper, and let sleep gently carry you into peaceful dreams, my friend. High above the world, far from the busy cities, the rushing winds, and the endless noise of life below, there lies an island that floats among the clouds. Its cliffs rise like watchtowers from the mists, and waterfalls tumble endlessly into the skies. This is Angel Island, a place both peaceful and mysterious, drifting quietly as if it belongs more to the heavens than to the earth. At the heart of this island rests a crystal unlike any other, a jewel of unimaginable size and beauty. It glows with a deep, calming light, shades of green that shimmer like still ponds touched by sunlight. This is the Master Emerald, the very soul of the island, and the reason it can remain in the skies. Its glow keeps balance, not just for Angel Island, but for the world itself. And watching over it, always, is Knuckles the Echidna. Knuckles was not like most who lived busy lives, surrounded by friends, villages, or bustling worlds. He was the last of his kind, the last guardian of an ancient tribe whose duty had stretched across centuries. From the moment he was old enough to understand, he knew his purpose. He was to protect the Master Emerald, to stand by it no matter the cost, and to guard against anyone who might seek to use its power for themselves. It was a heavy duty for someone so young, yet Knuckles carried it without complaint. His heart was strong, and though his days were often quiet, he did not falter. He had been taught that the emerald was not simply a stone, nor just a treasure. It was life itself, harmony itself. Without it, chaos could return to the world. And so, Knuckles stayed close, as steady as the cliffs around him, as firm as the roots of the ancient trees that swayed in Angel Island's breezes. Life for Knuckles was simple, but it was never lonely in the way one might think. Each day he would patrol the Emerald Shrine, circling the carved stone steps that led up to it. Sometimes he would climb to the very edges of the island's cliffs, where the winds howled and the clouds stretched endlessly beneath him. He would listen to the gentle rush of the waterfalls that never reached the ground. The sound was like a lullaby to him, constant and comforting, as if the island itself was whispering its thanks to its guardian. Knuckles did not need cities or noise. He was at home with the rustling of leaves, the call of distant birds, and the warmth of the emerald's glow that lit his nights. On quiet evenings, when the stars came out above the endless sky, he would sit cross-legged before the emerald, its light reflected in his eyes, softening his sharp and serious expression. Though his body was strong, his heart was tender in those moments. He would sometimes speak to the emerald, not expecting answers, but feeling as though it listened. "Another day gone," he might whisper. "The island is safe. I'll keep it safe tomorrow, too." And though the emerald gave no words, its glow seemed to pulse gently in reply, a reminder that his duty was never in vain. But Knuckles was not without curiosity. At times, when the clouds parted, he would gaze downward at the distant world below. Far across oceans and forests lay lands he had never walked, villages he had never seen, and people he had never spoken to. He wondered what it was like down there, what stories and adventures others shared. But then he would glance back at the emerald, at the shrine, at the carved murals left behind by his ancestors, and he would remind himself, "I am the guardian. This is where I belong." Still, his heart sometimes ached in quiet ways. Though he was content, there were evenings when the silence felt heavy, and he wished, just a little, that someone might share the stars with him. The island itself carried its own stories, stories that Knuckles had learned through carvings and whispers of the past. Long ago, the Echidna tribe had been many, and they too had watched over the emerald. But greed had consumed them. Power had called to them like a dangerous flame, and in chasing it, they lost everything. Knuckles was their legacy, not to repeat their mistakes, but to honor what remained. He did not resent the duty. In his heart, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Morning after morning, the sun rose on Angel Island, bathing the Emerald Shrine in warm light. Knuckles would stretch, his spiked fists tightening as he prepared for another day of watch. He would leap between cliffs with ease, his powerful hands gripping rocks no one else could climb. His strength was unmatched, his senses sharp, and though danger seldom came, he was always ready. For Knuckles, being prepared was not just a habit, it was his way of life. And yet, beneath that strength, there was gentleness. He would pause to watch small animals scurry past the shrine. He would let birds rest near the emerald, never chasing them away. In those moments, it was clear that Knuckles was not just a warrior, but a protector of peace, a quiet guardian who understood the value of stillness. At night, the emerald's glow kept shadows at bay. Sometimes Knuckles would dream as he slept near its pedestal. Dreams of a tribe he had never known, of voices calling across time, of soft laughter carried by winds long gone. And sometimes he dreamed of adventures he had not yet lived, flashes of running with others, of standing shoulder to shoulder with friends, of facing enemies together. When he woke, he would shake his head, smile faintly, and remind himself that dreams were only dreams. Still, those dreams had a way of preparing him, because soon his quiet life would change. The peace of Angel Island would be disturbed, and Knuckles would learn that the world below was not so distant after all. But in the beginning, before he met those who would change his story forever, Knuckles' tale was one of solitude and serenity. A tale of a boy with a noble heart, watching over an emerald that glowed like the stars, on an island that floated like a dream. And as the winds carried their gentle song through the trees, Knuckles sat by the Master Emerald, strong and steady, a guardian not just of a jewel but of balance itself. His story was just beginning, and though he did not yet know it, he was never truly alone. For the emerald's glow, the whispers of his ancestors, and the island itself would always be with him. So, if you close your eyes now and imagine the sound of waterfalls tumbling into endless skies, you might just hear Knuckles' footsteps as he circles the shrine. You might see the faint green glow of the emerald, steady and calm, and you might feel, just for a moment, the quiet strength of the guardian who keeps watch over it all. And so, our story begins. Softly, like the hush of evening wind over Angel Island, with Knuckles the Echidna, the guardian of the Master Emerald. Long before Knuckles was born, long before Angel Island floated quietly among the clouds, there was a time when the world was very different. In those days, the Echidna tribe was not a memory or a whisper of the past. It was a living people, proud and strong, with villages and families, leaders and warriors. Their world was filled with ambition, with dreams, and with shadows too. The Echidna tribe lived near the Master Emerald, just as Knuckles does now. But where Knuckles watched over it with quiet devotion, his ancestors often saw it in another light. To them, the emerald was not only a sacred treasure, but also a key to great power. They admired its glow, yes, but they also hungered for what it could give them: control, strength, perhaps even dominion over all. At the head of the tribe was a leader named Pachacamac. He was a stern and determined chief, a man who saw the world in terms of conquest. He believed his people could rise above all others, that they could become rulers of the land if only they could harness the Master Emerald and the smaller gems that surrounded it, the Chaos Emeralds. To Pachacamac, the emerald was not meant to be admired from afar, it was meant to be used. But not all in the tribe thought this way. Pachacamac's daughter, a gentle soul named Tikal, saw the emerald differently. To her, it was not a weapon, but a guardian itself, a source of peace and balance. She loved not just the emerald, but the small creatures that lived near it, the Chow, tiny beings of pure kindness who played by the emerald's side. She would spend hours with them, watching them splash in the water, feeding them fruit, laughing softly as they danced in the light. To Tikal, the world needed protection, not domination. And so, even within the tribe, there was a quiet struggle, not of fists or weapons, but of hearts. Pachacamac dreamed of power, Tikal dreamed of peace. The Emerald Shrine was also home to another presence, older and more mysterious than the Echidnas themselves. From the Emerald's power had come a guardian spirit, a being made of water and calm, but also of great strength. This was Chaos, sometimes called the God of Destruction, though in truth he wished only for harmony. He cared for the Chow, shielding them from harm, his body shimmering like rivers under moonlight. Chaos was gentle when left undisturbed, but like water, he could become fierce if the balance was broken. For many years, the tribe lived in uneasy balance with the shrine. Tikal visited often, whispering prayers, promising Chaos that she would protect the Chow and keep peace. But Pachacamac grew restless. To him, every day without conquest was a day wasted. His people had strength, numbers, and ambition. Why should they remain in the shadows of other tribes? Why should they not take the power that lay before them? And so, one fateful night, Pachacamac made his choice. He ordered his warriors to seize the Emerald Shrine. Torches lit the dark, and the ground shook with footsteps as the tribe marched forward. Tikal ran to them, begging her father to stop. "Please," she cried, her voice trembling. "The emerald is not ours to take. It keeps balance. If you harm it, you will harm us all." But Pachacamac would not listen. His eyes were fixed only on the power he believed would be his. He pushed Tikal aside and ordered the warriors to attack. Chaos, seeing his beloved Chow in danger, could no longer remain still. The gentle guardian transformed, his calm waters surging into a storm. His body rose like a tidal wave, his eyes glowing with fury. And then, destruction came. The tribe, with all its strength and weapons, was powerless before him. Buildings crumbled, warriors fell, and the night was filled with the roar of Chaos's wrath. Tikal, in desperation, turned to the Master Emerald itself. She pressed her hands against its glowing surface and whispered a prayer, asking it to seal Chaos away before more lives were lost. The Emerald heard her plea, and with a burst of light, Chaos was drawn inside, imprisoned within the jewel. But Tikal, too, was taken, her spirit bound with his. From that day forward, she lived only as a memory, a voice within the Emerald, waiting for the time when she might be heard again. The tribe was left broken. Their greed had destroyed them. Their leader's ambition had turned to ash. And so, the Echidna people faded, their numbers dwindling until, over time, they became only a story, a legend passed down through whispers carved into stone. Knuckles, though born many generations later, carried the weight of that story. He may never have known Pachacamac or Tikal in life, but he knew their choices. He knew the carvings, the murals on the shrine walls, the warnings etched into history. He knew that his duty was not just to protect the Emerald, but also to guard against repeating the mistakes of those who came before him. And perhaps, in some quiet corner of his heart, Knuckles felt the echo of Tikal's spirit, the same gentle love for peace, the same devotion to balance. The story of the Echidna tribe is a bedtime fable in itself. It is a tale of pride and humility, of greed and gentleness, of destruction and restoration. It is the tale of how power, when sought selfishly, can unravel everything. But it is also the tale of how kindness, even from one small voice like Tikal's, can protect the world for generations to come. Now, when the wind whispers through Angel Island, when the glow of the Master Emerald bathes the shrine in its soft green light, one might imagine the voices of the past still lingered there. The laughter of the Chow, the pleas of Tikal, the roar of Chaos, and the silence of a tribe that could have been, but was lost to their own ambition. Knuckles listens to those whispers, whether he realizes it or not. He is their final guardian, their last living reminder. Where they failed, he must succeed. Where they sought power, he must seek balance. And so, his watch is not just for himself, not just for the island, but for all those who came before him. For in the story of the ancient Echidna tribe lies a lesson as old as time. That true strength is not in taking, but in protecting. And that even when a people fall, their memory can guide those who remain, like starlight guiding travelers through the night. The days on Angel Island had always been quiet for Knuckles. He rose with the sun, stretched his strong arms, and walked the familiar paths around the Master Emerald's shrine. The waterfalls sang their endless song, the clouds drifted gently, and the emerald pulsed with its calm green glow. For years, nothing disturbed this balance. But one day, the peace of the island trembled. The ground shook. Not the deep, steady shake of the earth moving, but a strange vibration, as though something unnatural had stirred. Knuckles, always alert, tightened his fists and scanned the skies. He was the guardian, and any disturbance, no matter how small, could not be ignored. That was the day Dr. Eggman arrived. Eggman, the rotund scientist with schemes as wide as his mustache, had long sought the power of the Chaos Emeralds. He dreamed of building machines and armies, of ruling the world under his iron grip, and now his gaze had turned to the Master Emerald. If he could claim it, not only would he control its immeasurable energy, but he could also use it to power his airship, the mighty Death Egg, and dominate the skies. Eggman was clever, and he knew brute force alone would not defeat the Guardian. He had studied Knuckles, understood his loyalty, and devised a plan as cunning as it was deceitful. When he landed on Angel Island, he approached Knuckles not with threats, but with words, twisting truths into lies. "Guardian," Eggman said smoothly, adjusting his round glasses, "your island is in danger. A hedgehog named Sonic is coming, and he wants your emerald. He has already gathered Chaos Emeralds to fuel his greed. Soon, he will try to take the Master Emerald for himself. You must stop him." Knuckles narrowed his eyes. He had never heard of Sonic before, never seen him. Yet Eggman's words planted a seed of suspicion. If Sonic was indeed approaching, carrying Chaos Emeralds, then perhaps he did pose a threat. The Master Emerald could not fall into the hands of anyone, not even a well-meaning traveler. And so Knuckles agreed. Thus began one of the most unusual rivalries in all of Angel Island's history. Sonic arrives. Far below, Sonic the Hedgehog and his friend Tails soared toward the island in their biplane, the Tornado. They had gathered the 7 Chaos Emeralds and were chasing after Eggman, determined to put an end to his latest scheme. For them, it was just another adventure. For Knuckles, it was the arrival of a supposed thief. The Tornado touched down, and Sonic leapt from its wing with his usual confidence. His quills blew back in the wind, his grin wide, his eyes sparkling with energy. Tails followed closely, cheerful and eager. Together they began to explore the island. It wasn't long before Knuckles made his move. Hidden among the trees, he watched the Hedgehog with suspicion. Sonic seemed carefree, even friendly, but Knuckles remembered Eggman's warning. He has come for the emerald. Sonic paused to admire a ring of golden flowers when, suddenly, the ground erupted. Knuckles burst from the earth with a mighty punch, scattering dirt and leaves. Sonic stumbled back, startled but ready. "Who are you?" Sonic asked, cocking his head. "I'm the Guardian," Knuckles said firmly, his voice low and commanding. "And you're not welcome here. The Master Emerald isn't yours to take." Sonic blinked, then laughed softly. "Master Emerald? I don't even know what that is, but I'm definitely here to stop Eggman." Knuckles didn't believe him. Without another word, he lunged forward, his fists swinging. Sonic dodged, spinning into a ball and leaping over Knuckles' head. The two clashed in bursts of speed and strength, Sonic darting with quicksilver agility, Knuckles countering with crushing blows that shook the ground. It wasn't a battle of hatred, but a contest of wills. Knuckles believed he was protecting his duty. Sonic believed he was fighting off yet another obstacle in his journey. And in the shadows, Eggman watched with a sly grin. His plan was working perfectly. Tricks and traps. Knuckles became a constant presence on Sonic's path through the island. Whenever Sonic dashed through lush forests or glowing ruins, Knuckles was there, setting traps. He pulled levers that opened pitfalls beneath Sonic's feet. He caused bridges to collapse just as Sonic dashed across them. He blocked paths with giant boulders, smirking as Sonic scrambled to find another way. Sonic, however, took it all in stride. To him, it was almost like a game. Every trap was a challenge, every confrontation a chance to prove his speed. Tails sometimes grew frustrated, but Sonic would only laugh and say, "Don't worry, little buddy, he'll figure it out eventually." The Hedgehog's good humor only annoyed Knuckles further. He wanted Sonic to take him seriously, to understand that this was not a game, but a sacred duty. Each time he sprang from hiding, his punches were swift, his eyes determined. And yet, Sonic always slipped away at the last second, leaving Knuckles gritting his teeth. Still, Knuckles never hated Sonic. Deep inside, he respected his speed, his cleverness, his refusal to give up. But Eggman's lies had clouded his judgment, and so the rivalry continued. The moment of truth. As the battles went on, the true threat began to reveal itself. Eggman was not idle while the two fought. He had been using the distraction to rebuild his Death Egg and harness energy from the Chaos Emeralds. Knuckles did not see this at first, too focused on stopping Sonic. But gradually, cracks in Eggman's story began to show. One evening, while patrolling near the shrine, Knuckles heard the distant rumble of machines. He crept closer, following the sound, and saw Eggman's robots tearing through the jungle, drilling into the earth and gathering resources. This was not the work of a protector. This was the work of someone seeking power. Doubt stirred in Knuckles' chest. Could it be that Eggman had tricked him? The truth came crashing down when Eggman at last struck at the shrine itself. As Knuckles confronted Sonic in yet another clash, Eggman swooped down in one of his machines and seized the Master Emerald. Knuckles turned in shock. "No, that's mine to protect," he shouted. Eggman only laughed, his voice echoing through the skies. "Thank you, Guardian. You've been most helpful." It was then Knuckles realized the painful truth. Sonic had never been the thief. Eggman had played him from the very beginning. Allies, at last. Knuckles' heart burned with shame and anger, not at Sonic, but at himself. He had let his suspicion blind him. He had betrayed his duty. For the first time, he looked at Sonic not as an enemy, but as an ally. "I was wrong," Knuckles admitted, his fists tightening. "Eggman's the real enemy. We have to stop him. Together." Sonic simply grinned, no resentment in his voice. "Took you long enough, tough guy. Let's do it." From that moment, the rivalry softened into something else, something stronger. Knuckles, with his unmatched strength, and Sonic, with his blazing speed, became a team. Along with Tails, they raced across Angel Island, chasing down Eggman and his machines. The battles were fierce. Eggman unleashed robots of every shape and size, each stronger than the last. But with Sonic's agility, Tails' cleverness, and Knuckles' raw power, they pressed forward. Knuckles' fists shattered steel. Sonic's spin dashes tore through defenses. Tails guided them through the skies. At last, they confronted Eggman aboard the Death Egg itself, the giant fortress trembling in the clouds. Side by side, Sonic and Knuckles fought with everything they had. And when the final blow landed, Eggman's machine crumbled, fire and smoke filling the skies as the villain fled once more. Chat. The Master Emerald was returned to its shrine. The island's balance was restored. A rivalry transformed. When the dust settled, Knuckles stood before Sonic, his eyes softer than before. "I misjudged you," he said quietly. "I thought you were a threat, but you're a protector too." Sonic crossed his arms and smirked. "Guess that makes us even. You're pretty good yourself, for a guy who punches first and asks questions later." For the first time, Knuckles allowed himself a small smile. Their rivalry was not gone. It never would be. But it had changed. No longer was it born of mistrust. Now it was something closer to friendship, a playful competition that would follow them for years to come. And though Knuckles returned to his solitary duty on Angel Island, he knew the world was larger than he had once believed. There were allies out there, friends who could be trusted, battles that could be shared. His heart, once closed to all but the Emerald, had been opened, even if only a little. From then on, whenever Sonic's footsteps echoed on Angel Island, Knuckles no longer leapt to fight. Instead, he braced himself for war, or a challenge, a race, or perhaps a new adventure. Their first encounter had been filled with mistrust, tricks, and clashes, but in the end, it gave Knuckles something he had never expected, a bond that would last a lifetime. A gentle reflection. So if you listen closely to the winds of Angel Island, you might still hear the echoes of their first meeting, the clash of fists and quills, the laughter of Sonic as he dodged another trap, the frustration in Knuckles' growl as Sonic slipped away, and finally, the quiet acceptance, the beginning of trust. It is a story not just of conflict, but of growth, of how misunderstandings can be healed, how rivals can become friends, and how even a guardian bound by solitude can open his heart when the right ally comes along. Knuckles' first encounter with Sonic was not the end of his loneliness, but it was the beginning of something new, a new chapter, a new bond, a reminder that even the strongest guardian sometimes needs a friend. And under the calm, green glow of the Master Emerald, their story, like the island itself, would continue to float, steady and timeless, in the skies above. The battles on Angel Island had ended. Eggman's machines lay in ruins, his schemes scattered like dust in the wind. The Master Emerald once again stood in its rightful place, glowing softly at the shrine as if nothing had ever disturbed its peace. The waterfalls resumed their song, The clouds drifted around the island's cliffs, and the emerald's glow returned balance to the skies. But though the island looked the same as it always had, something within Knuckles had changed. For so long, he had believed his duty meant being alone, that trust was dangerous, that anyone who approached the Master Emerald was a threat. Eggman's lies had seemed believable because Knuckles had closed his heart to the idea of allies. Yet Sonic had shown him something new. The hedgehog had not mocked him for being tricked. He had not turned away in anger. Instead, Sonic had simply smiled, shrugged, and welcomed Knuckles into the fight against Eggman. That simple act of forgiveness lingered in Knuckles' mind long after the battles ended. It was a warmth he wasn't used to, a spark that softened the weight of solitude. The first quiet moment. After the Master Emerald was returned to its shrine, Sonic and Tails stayed for a little while on the island. The three of them stood together at the top of the shrine steps, watching as the emerald pulsed steadily with green light. Knuckles crossed his arms, staring at the jewel he had sworn to protect. He felt the shame of having been fooled, but also the relief that it was safe again. He wasn't sure what to say. Words did not come easily to him. Sonic, on the other hand, leaned casually against the shrine, hands behind his head, looking as though he had just come back from a jog rather than a life-or-death battle. "Well," Sonic said, "that wasn't too bad. Bit of a workout, but nothing we couldn't handle." Knuckles gave him a sideways glance. "You're not upset. I tried to stop you. I nearly handed the emerald to Eggman." Sonic only grinned. "Hey, don't sweat it. You thought you were doing the right thing. Besides, Eggman's a tricky guy. He's fooled me more than once. What matters is we stopped him together." Knuckles blinked. He had expected blame, anger, or at the very least, gloating. Instead, Sonic's words carried no bitterness, only ease, only warmth. That was the moment Knuckles realized Sonic wasn't just fast with his feet, he was fast to forgive too. From rivals to partners. Over the following days, Sonic and Knuckles crossed paths again and again. Sometimes Sonic would dash across the island just to see how fast he could scale its cliffs, and Knuckles, protective as ever, would intercept him. "What are you doing?" Knuckles would demand. "Just testing my speed," Sonic would reply with a smirk. Knuckles would frown. "This isn't a racetrack. This is sacred ground." But then Sonic would challenge him. "Race me to the top of the shrine. If you win, I'll slow down. If I win, you have to admit, I'm faster." Knuckles, stubborn and proud, never backed down from a challenge. And so the two would sprint. One gliding and climbing with raw strength, the other spinning and darting with lightning speed. Sometimes Knuckles won, sometimes Sonic did, but each race ended with laughter, not anger. Their rivalry, once sharp with mistrust, softened into a game. They tested each other, pushed each other, and in the process, built something far stronger than either had expected: trust. Tails' gentle observation. Tails, ever the quiet observer, noticed the change before Knuckles did. "You know," Tails said one evening as the three of them sat on a cliff's edge, watching the sun dip below the horizon, "you two act like brothers." Knuckles blinked, taken aback. "Brothers?" "Yeah," Tails said with a small smile. "Always challenging each other, always trying to one-up each other. But you'd never let anything happen to the other guy. That's what brothers do." Sonic chuckled and nudged Knuckles with his elbow. "Guess that makes you family, tough guy." Knuckles didn't reply right away, but something warm settled in his chest. Family. It had been a long time since he had thought about that word. He was the last of his tribe, the last of his kind. Yet here were Sonic and Tails, offering something that felt almost the same. Lessons in trust. Knuckles had always believed strength meant standing alone, fists clenched, watching over the emerald in solitude. But through his time with Sonic and Tails, he began to learn another kind of strength, the strength of trust. He saw it in the way Sonic relied on Tails without hesitation, letting the young fox guide the tornado or solve mechanical puzzles. He saw it in how Tails trusted Sonic, never doubting his speed or courage. And slowly, Knuckles began to feel that same trust growing between himself and them. One night, as the stars glittered above Angel Island, Knuckles sat with Sonic by the shrine. "You always act like nothing worries you," Knuckles said quietly. "Like you don't take anything seriously. How do you do that?" Sonic tilted his head, watching the emeralds glow. "It's not that I don't take things seriously, it's just that I believe they'll work out if we give it our all. Worrying doesn't stop Eggman. Fighting does, and trust makes it easier." Knuckles frowned thoughtfully. "Trust isn't easy for me." Sonic looked at him and smiled softly. "Doesn't have to be easy, just has to be real." Knuckles didn't reply, but the words stayed with him. The last goodbye. For now. Eventually, Sonic and Tails had to leave. Their adventures called them elsewhere, and Angel Island, restored and calm, was safe under Knuckles' watch. On the day of their departure, the three stood together near the island's edge. The tornado's wings gleamed in the sunlight, ready to take flight. "You'll be all right up here?" Tails asked. Knuckles smirked. "I've been all right up here my whole life." Sonic stepped forward, holding out his fist. "See you around, Guardian." For a moment, Knuckles hesitated. Then he lifted his own fist and bumped it against Sonic's. It was a small gesture, but it carried more weight than words could. As Sonic and Tails flew off into the horizon, Knuckles returned to the shrine. The Master Emerald glowed as it always had, steady and calm. But this time, Knuckles didn't feel quite so alone. Somewhere out there, beyond the clouds, he had friends, true friends, who would come if he ever needed them. And that thought made the silence of Angel Island feel less heavy, more comforting. A gentle reflection. The rivalry between Knuckles and Sonic did not end on that day. In truth, it never ended at all. They would continue to challenge one another, to race, to bicker, to test each other's limits. But beneath it all was a bond forged in trust, a friendship that no trick or trap could break. Knuckles had started their story as a guardian, mistrustful of outsiders, convinced that his fists alone could keep the world safe. But through Sonic's laughter, Tails' kindness, and their shared battles, he learned that strength could also mean opening his heart. So, when the winds whisper through Angel Island and the Master Emerald glows in the night, you can imagine Knuckles standing tall at its shrine, not just as a lonely guardian, but as a friend, a rival, and a brother in spirit to the hedgehog who once was his foe. Their rivalry had turned into friendship, and that friendship would carry them through many adventures yet to come. The tornado's wings had long disappeared into the horizon, leaving only the soft whisper of wind and the endless sky above Angel Island. Knuckles stood at the cliff's edge for some time, watching the faint trail of the plane dissolve into the distance. Then slowly, he turned back toward the shrine. The Master Emerald stood tall and luminous, its light casting long shadows across the steps. The adventures had ended, the battles had quieted, and once again, Knuckles was alone. It was the way it had always been. And yet, this time, the silence felt different. The weight of duty. For as long as he could remember, Knuckles had lived by a single purpose: protect the Master Emerald. It was more than a jewel. It was the heart of Angel Island, the power that kept it floating above the seas, the balance that tied the island's fate to the world below. Without it, the island would crash, and chaos would spread. This duty had been passed to him from the ancestors of his tribe, an unbroken chain of guardians stretching back into history. Knuckles was the last link. He carried their will alone. As he sat on the steps of the shrine, the emerald glowing steadily behind him, he thought about what that meant. His life was tied to this duty. While others traveled, laughed, and lived freely, Knuckles was bound to a single place, a single role. He was the Guardian. Sometimes that title felt like a badge of honor. Other times, it felt like a chain. The empty island. Angel Island was beautiful. Lush jungles, hidden waterfalls, high cliffs crowned with clouds, and the endless shimmer of the sea far below. But beauty could not always fill the silence. Knuckles wandered through the forests, gliding over valleys, climbing mountains, listening to the calls of birds and the rustle of leaves. He knew every path, every cave, every stream. He knew where the fruit trees ripened in the summer, where the wildflowers bloomed in spring, and where the stones warmed under the midday sun. And yet, all of it belonged only to him. No voices echoed in the trees, no laughter carried over the waterfalls, no footsteps but his own pressed into the soil. There were days when the silence comforted him, like a soft blanket, but there were nights when it pressed against him, heavy and unyielding, reminding him of what he lacked: companionship. The Guardian's thoughts. At the shrine, Knuckles often sat cross-legged before the Master Emerald, gazing at its shifting glow. Its light was steady, but never static. It shimmered with patterns, like ripples of water or faint heartbeats. Sometimes, Knuckles imagined that the Emerald could hear his thoughts. "Am I doing this right?" he would ask aloud in the quiet. "Is this really the way it's supposed to be? Watching, waiting, guarding, alone?" The Emerald did not answer, of course. It only pulsed with gentle light, as if breathing. But in that glow, Knuckles sometimes found a strange comfort. He told himself the Emerald understood, even if it could not speak. Still, questions lingered. He thought about Sonic, so free to run across the world. He thought about Tails, always learning, always creating, always at his friend's side. And he thought about himself, tied forever to the Emerald, watching over it as days and nights slipped past. Dreams of the tribe. When Knuckles slept beneath the stars, sometimes he dreamed of the ancient Echidna tribe. He imagined them as shadows moving across the island, their voices carrying through the air, their presence filling the places that now stood empty. In his dreams, he was not alone. He was one of many, walking among his people, sharing in their songs and their burdens. He could hear the wisdom of elders, the laughter of children, the strength of warriors. But when the dawn broke, those voices vanished. He opened his eyes to the silence of the island, to the stillness of the Emerald, to the endless duty that was his alone. The dreams left him both comforted and saddened, reminders of what had been and of what was lost forever. Small comforts. Despite the loneliness, Knuckles found small comforts in his solitude. He enjoyed the feeling of warm sunlight soaking into his fur as he rested on cliff tops. He enjoyed the sound of rushing waterfalls, the crash of waves below, the song of crickets at night. He enjoyed the rhythm of his own training, his fists striking stone, his body growing stronger with every passing day. There was peace in the routine. Sometimes he would climb to the highest peak of Angel Island and watch the horizon, wondering what adventures Sonic and Tails were having at that very moment. He would picture them racing through green fields, outsmarting Eggman, laughing together. And though the thought stirred a faint ache in his chest, it also made him smile. Maybe one day, he whispered to himself, they'll come back. The stillness of night. Nights on Angel Island were long and quiet. The sky stretched endlessly, filled with stars that shimmered like tiny emeralds scattered across black velvet. The moon cast silver light over the island, illuminating the shrine and the guardian who kept watch. Knuckles often sat awake through the night, his eyes fixed on the horizon, ears tuned to the faintest sound. The Master Emerald glowed beside him, steady and strong, like a heartbeat that never faltered. Sometimes he felt like the island itself was alive, breathing with him, holding him in its vast silence. He would close his eyes, listen to the rustle of wind through leaves, and let the rhythm of the night lull him into peace. In those moments, solitude felt less like loneliness and more like belonging. A visit from the wind. There were times when Knuckles imagined the wind itself was speaking to him. When it rushed through the trees, it whispered reminders of Sonic's laughter. When it swept across the cliffs, it carried echoes of Tails' gentle voice. When it whistled over the shrine, it felt almost like the voices of his ancestors, telling him to stand tall, to keep his duty, to never waver. The wind was never still for long. It came and went, like visitors who stayed only briefly before continuing their journey. Knuckles sometimes thought of Sonic that way too, like the wind, free, unbound, always moving, but always returning. That thought kept him warm on the loneliest nights. Reflection at the shrine. One evening, as the sun set in hues of pink and gold, Knuckles stood at the top of the shrine steps, gazing at the Master Emerald. He placed his hand on its cool surface, feeling the hum of energy vibrate beneath his palm. "I don't know if I'll ever leave this place," he murmured, "but maybe that's all right. Maybe this is who I am meant to be." The emerald glowed faintly brighter, as though acknowledging his words. Knuckles closed his eyes. He thought about Sonic, about Tails, about the way they had trusted him, even after his mistakes. He thought about the strength of that trust, about how it had changed him. And though he stood alone, he realized he was not truly lonely. The bond he had forged with them was invisible, but unbreakable, a thread that connected him to the wider world, even if he remained rooted here. A guardian's peace. The solitude of Angel Island did not vanish, but Knuckles learned to live with it. He found peace in the quiet, strength in the silence, and comfort in the thought that he was not forgotten. His rivalry with Sonic had blossomed into friendship. His loneliness was softened by memories of laughter, by the dreams of his tribe, by the whisper of the wind. And so, each day, Knuckles rose with the sun, trained his body, and guarded the Master Emerald. Each night he sat beneath the stars, listening to the stillness, his heart steady like the emerald's glow. He was the guardian, solitary, strong, and unwavering, and though his path was lonely, it was also noble. For in his solitude, Knuckles carried not just the weight of the Master Emerald, but also the spirit of trust, friendship, and resilience that had been born from his bond with Sonic and Tails. And that, in its own quiet way, made the solitude feel less heavy, more like peace. Closing image. So when the island drifts above the ocean, surrounded by mist and bathed in moonlight, you can imagine Knuckles standing tall at the shrine, his silhouette framed by the glowing emerald. Alone, yes, but not forgotten. The world sleeps below, the stars watch above, and the guardian keeps his silent vigil. And in the gentle rhythm of waves and wind, the solitude becomes not a burden, but a lullaby. Steady, strong, and eternal. The sky above Angel Island was a tapestry of clouds and sunlight, stitched together by gusts that moved like fingers across a sleeping face. For a time, peace had settled again over the island. The Master Emerald hummed quietly. The waterfalls sang their steady song, and Knuckles kept watch from the high ledges. Yet peace, like a weathered traveler, does not always stay forever. Sometimes it pauses only to collect breath before another journey. One such pause was broken by the subtle rumble of machinery on the horizon. It was a sound the island did not like, metal groaning against wind, gears whispering of purpose. Knuckles sensed it as one senses a change in the air before a storm. He tightened his fists and climbed to the highest perch, where clouds parted like curtains and the world below seemed very small. Dr. Eggman's schemes were never far from the sky. The clever but cruel doctor had a new plan, and this time his metal fingers were reaching for places few machines should tread. From the clouds above, Eggman's contraption, a fortress of iron and steam, descended toward Angel Island. He looked not only for the Emerald's power, but for the Sky Sanctuary itself, a lost place of ancient technology and glowing relics hidden above the island. Eggman believed if he could wake the sanctuary's heart, he could harness energies beyond imagination. That Eggman was patient, and he was sly. He used whatever tricks he had learned from previous failures. Old rumors, stolen maps, and cold calculations were his companions, and as he always did, he found a way to twist someone else's belief to his advantage. Knuckles, still wary from earlier betrayals, kept vigilant, but Eggman's plan unfolded like a shadow creeping under a door. The doctor stirred the Sky Sanctuary, and with it came trapped echoes of the old world gears groaning to life, ancient robots clanking from long slumbers, and shapes of history waking into motion. The air smelled of ozone and old copper. The very clouds seemed to respond with trembling breath. At first, the Sky Sanctuary's awakening felt like a threat to the island's calm. Mysteries that should have stayed buried now shone with reckless curiosity. Knuckles pressed his palms to the shrine's cool stone and listened to the hum of the Master Emerald. He felt responsibility. As a quiet knot in his chest, the island needed him. Eggman's machines rumbled through the sanctuary's pathways, searching for energy caches and control nodes. Knuckles confronted them with the kind of force only he possessed. Earth-rattling punches that sent bolts scattering and gears flying. Yet for every robot he smashed, another would rise from a shadowed corridor. It was as if the sanctuary itself had more secrets than one guardian could hold at once. Then came the smear of blue across the sky, Sonic, faster than a summer wind, arriving with the same grin and the same fearless heart. He and Tails were there, as they often were, determined to stop Eggman before he could wrench the island's soul apart. But slower things had a way of catching up. The sanctuary's mysteries were not straightforward, and old machines answered only to old keys. Eggman, sensing the hedgehog's speed, still smirked. He had devised traps and guile that could catch even the fleet-footed Sonic off guard. He set levers and shifting floors, carved illusions of open space where pits yawned, and placed guardians that held patterns of the past. Sonic dashed through them, as if through falling stars. Knuckles, with equal ferocity, smashed obstacles apart. Together they were a balance of swift light and immovable force. But it was not only machines that made the sanctuary dangerous. Its oldest wards stirred too. Echoes of the Echidna tribe's past whispered through the corridors, reminders of pride and warnings of hubris. Knuckles felt these whispers like tugging hands at the sleeve of memory, bringing images of mural faces and old carvings to mind. He understood that the sanctuary's power was ancient and not meant to be used lightly. At a turning point, Eggman struck at the heart of the sanctuary with an audacity that burned like lightning. He found a chamber where dormant energy pooled in a basin carved by unknown hands. With a scream of gears, he tried to pull that energy into his machine. The doctor's machines converged like a swarm of metal beetles, and the sanctuary's defenses began to falter. Knuckles saw the danger and ran. His fists pounded the stone and the metal. His strength was a thunderclap against Eggman's arrogance. Sonic darted like a needle of light, disrupting wiring with a spin dash and smashing control panels with practiced grace. Together, they wove through collapsing bridges and sparking conduits, each action a quiet promise to the island itself. We will not let this fall. Through smoke and falling stone, Knuckles felt something shift inside him. The old solitude that had been his armor softened in the heat of the fight. He could have guarded alone. He had done so for years, and his claws and will were known to be sharp. Yet the sight of Sonic and Tails risking themselves for the island kindled a new clarity. Sometimes guardians needed companions, not because they were weak, but because the world's dangers were wider than one pair of hands. Eggman's machines grew desperate. He threw everything into one fierce gambit, launching his most vicious automaton toward the sanctuary's core. Its bulk was terrible, its claws the size of boulders, its eyes were cold lamps that did not know mercy. Knuckles met it without hesitation. Where the robot struck with cruel calculation, Knuckles answered with heart and bone, his fists shattering plates of armor, and his will breaking circuits like brittle twigs. Sonic, with speed like spilled starlight, found openings where none seemed to exist. Tails, nimble and smart, rerouted power lines, and shut off valves that fed the machine's fury. Eggman's smug grin faded into frantic cursing as plans collapsed into smoke. At last, with a final, echoing crash, the monstrous automaton fell into silence. The sanctuary's alarms wound down to a tired whine, and the great gears slowed their frantic dance. The doctor's death egg, or the part of him that had been nearest the machine, rattled and spat, and eventually fled, tail between metal legs. The sky sanctuary's heartbeat steadied. In the hush that followed, the three friends, Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails, sat upon a ledge overlooking the sanctuary's moonlit inner gardens. Steam coiled upward like pale incense, and the echoes of the battle faded into a gentle, steady hum. Knuckles' breathing slowed. He felt tired, but also strangely light, as though a weight he had not known he carried had eased a little. Sonic nudged him with an easy smile. "Nice work up there. You all right, Guardian?" he asked. Knuckles let out a small, embarrassed chuckle. "I am. I don't like being tricked. I don't like losing what I'm sworn to protect. But I'm glad you were here." Tails, perched on Knuckles' shoulder, added softly, "We're glad you were here too. You're pretty great at smashing things." They laughed in a small, comfortable way that felt like warm tea in the chill. It was not the eruption of war anymore, but a quiet warmth that grows when danger passes and friends remain. That night, as Knuckles walked once more to the shrine, the emerald's green light seemed to glow a little gentler. He thought of the sky sanctuary, of its yawning ruins, and of the ancient hands that had built it, and he felt a reverence that was not only for duty, but also for the future. Guardianship, he realized, was not merely blocking harm. It was learning when to reach out, when to let others stand beside you, and when to share the hill of responsibility so it did not crush a single back. He did not forget the lesson. The island returned to its steady rhythms, but Knuckles understood something new about himself. The strongest guardians are not those who stand alone forever, but those who know when to accept help and how to give it in return. In the soft glow of the Master Emerald, with a sky that sighed into sleep, Knuckles allowed himself, for the first time in a long time, to feel less solitary and as the island drifted in the clouds, safe once more, a quiet promise lingered in the air, a promise of watchfulness. Yes, but also of quiet companionship, shared laughter, and the knowledge that some battles, when fought together, become memories that warm the heart for many nights to come. High above the clouds, Angel Island drifted like a dream. The waterfalls glistened, the trees swayed gently, and the sound of the Master Emerald's hum echoed through the shrine. Knuckles, as always, stood as its guardian. For him, days blended into each other, quiet, watchful, steady. His life had always been tied to the emerald, to its protection, to keeping the island afloat. But destiny has a way of knocking when you least expect it, and one night, under a velvet sky painted with stars, destiny came calling again. The Master Emerald pulsed uneasily, its glow flickering like a candle in the wind. Knuckles approached, his fists clenching instinctively, sensing something was wrong. He placed his hands on the smooth crystal surface. Instead of the usual steady thrum of energy, he felt agitation, a ripple of distress that reached deep into his heart. And then, without warning, the shrine trembled. The emerald's light shattered into 1,000 fragments, scattering into the air like fireflies in panic. Knuckles staggered back, eyes wide, as the great jewel that was his life's purpose cracked into countless shards and vanished. The island shuddered, groaning as though it, too, were wounded. Without the Master Emerald's full power, Angel Island began to sink, slowly descending from its place in the sky toward the sea below. Water rushed into view, waves foaming as they rose closer. Knuckles gasped. He had sworn an oath to protect the Master Emerald at all costs, and now it was broken before his eyes. "Who could have done this?" he whispered, fists tightening, his voice a low rumble of sorrow and determination. The answer came swiftly. Out of the shadows slithered a strange figure fluid, translucent, shimmering under the moonlight. Its form shifted like water, its eyes glowing with cold, ancient wisdom. This was Chaos, the water spirit, released after millennia of slumber. Knuckles had never seen a creature like it before. Its presence was overwhelming, like the weight of an ancient tide pressing against his chest, and yet, despite his strength and courage, he knew this was not an ordinary foe. Chaos was tied to the Master Emerald's fate, bound to its fragments, and its return meant danger far beyond Angel Island's skies. As Chaos slipped away, fading into the shadows of the night, Knuckles steadied himself. The task was clear. He had to find every shard of the Master Emerald, no matter how far they had scattered, no matter how long it took. The island depended on it. His oath depended on it. Searching the world. For the first time, Knuckles' journey would take him beyond Angel Island's borders. He leapt across valleys, soared with the wind, and dug through soil and stone, following the faint resonance of the emerald shards. His connection to the Master Emerald guided him like a compass. Though invisible to the eye, he could feel the shards, hidden in mountains, rivers, and even the depths of bustling cities. The world outside was larger and louder than the quiet cliffs he knew. There were bustling streets filled with people, neon lights glowing in the night, trains that roared across tracks like metal beasts. Knuckles had never spent time among human towns, and the noise pressed against his senses like an unfamiliar storm. Yet he pressed on, moving with determination. His mission was too important to falter. Every shard he found was a step closer to restoring balance. Some lay buried in caves, hidden behind waterfalls, or tucked deep into city alleys where only a sharp eye and strong fists could uncover them. But it wasn't only the emerald shards that stirred his journey. As Knuckles searched, he began to learn pieces of the world's stories tied to Chaos, to an ancient tribe of echidnas who had long ago clashed with the water spirit. Visions flickered before his eyes when he touched the shards. A girl named Tikal, standing between her people and Chaos, begging them to turn away from greed. He saw the tribe's warriors trying to seize the power of the Chaos Emeralds, only to unleash destruction that scarred history forever. These visions haunted Knuckles. Were these his ancestors? Was his role as guardian tied not only to duty, but also to an ancient mistake? He clenched his fists, staring at the shards in his hands. I won't let history repeat itself. I'll make this right. Crossing paths with friends and foes. As Knuckles' search stretched further, he crossed paths with familiar faces, Sonic and Tails, racing to stop Dr. Eggman's latest scheme. Eggman, as always, sought to control Chaos, feeding it Chaos Emeralds to increase its power. Each time Chaos absorbed another emerald, it grew stronger, more monstrous, more dangerous. At first, Knuckles didn't trust Sonic completely. Old habits die hard, and echoes of their rivalry lingered. But as events unfolded, it became clear they shared the same goal: to stop Chaos, to protect the world from ruin. Their journeys intersected in brief but vital moments. Sonic chasing Eggman across Speed Highway, while Knuckles unearthed shards from hidden corners. Tails building devices to slow Eggman's machines, while Knuckles battled robotic guardians guarding shards. Each played their part in a larger dance of fate. And still, Chaos grew stronger. Knuckles faced Eggman more than once, punching through his metal contraptions, tearing apart robots that sought to block his way. Eggman taunted him, mocking his endless duty to the Emerald. "You're wasting your life guarding that big rock," Eggman sneered once, his voice dripping with cruelty. "Join me, and I'll give you power you've never dreamed of." Knuckles' glare was steady, his voice calm but firm. "I don't need your power. I have my own, and I'll never abandon my duty." He struck Eggman's machine with a single blow, sending sparks scattering into the night. The heart of Chaos. The journey was long, but shard by shard, Knuckles rebuilt the Master Emerald. Still, the final confrontation loomed. Chaos had reached its most terrifying form. Perfect chaos, a towering serpent of water and rage unleashed upon Station Square. It rose from the city like a tidal wave, its roar shaking the sky, its body swirling with infinite fury. So, Knuckles watched from a high ledge as Sonic, empowered by the Chaos Emeralds, transformed into Super Sonic to face the monster. The golden hedgehog blazed like a comet, darting through torrents of water and striking Chaos's vulnerable core. Knuckles' role was different, quieter, but just as vital. While Sonic battled the beast, Knuckles returned to the shrine, placing the final shards back into the Master Emerald. With each piece restored, the emerald's glow brightened, its energy rippling outward like calming waves. He whispered a promise as he set the last shard into place. "I won't fail you again. I won't fail this world." The Master Emerald's song grew stronger, its ancient power resonating with chaos. The water spirit, calmed by the restored balance, finally released its rage. In a moment of quiet brilliance, Chaos's form shimmered, and Tikal's spirit appeared once more, soothing the ancient guardian's heart. Together they faded into peace, leaving behind calm waters where destruction had raged. Reflections of a Guardian. When it was over, Knuckles stood once more at the shrine. The Master Emerald gleamed in its restored glory, its light steady and proud. Angel Island, lifted by its power, rose back into the skies where it belonged. Knuckles exhaled slowly, gazing at the emerald with a mixture of relief and solemnity. His journey had taken him beyond the island, beyond solitude, into a world filled with people, chaos, danger, and friendship. He realized something important that night. Guardianship was more than isolation. It was not about standing apart from the world, but about standing for the world, protecting the Master. Emerald meant protecting everything. Its power touched the sky, the seas, the lands below, and the lives that depended on balance. Though he would return to solitude, his perspective had shifted. The visions of Tikal lingered in his heart, a reminder that even ancient mistakes could be mended with courage and compassion. And the sight of Sonic, glowing golden against the storm, reminded him that he was not alone in this fight. A quiet night on Angel Island. The stars returned to their calm glow, the island once again floating peacefully among the clouds. Knuckles sat cross-legged before the Master Emerald, listening to its hum, watching its light shimmer across the stone walls. He thought of the world he had seen, the city lights reflecting off the ocean, the rush of trains, the noise of voices in crowded streets. He thought of Sonic's unshakable determination, Tails' quiet brilliance, and even Eggman's endless schemes. And then, he thought of himself. "I may be the Guardian," he murmured softly, "but I'm not just that anymore. I've seen the world. I've fought for it. I'll keep doing so as long as I have to." The night was still. The Master Emerald pulsed once, as if in agreement. Knuckles leaned back, eyes heavy, heart lighter than it had been in years. Above the drifting clouds, Angel Island sighed, cradled in the arms of the sky, and for a little while at least, all was at peace. Angel Island floated gently above the clouds, as it always did, glowing in the quiet light of dawn. The Master Emerald sat at the heart of the shrine, humming with its ancient rhythm, and Knuckles the Echidna stood guard, as he always had. But even guardians, no matter how solitary, sometimes find themselves drawn into unexpected bonds. And for Knuckles, that moment came in the days when a new band of friends entered his life, a curious, mismatched group that would come to be known as the Chaotix. A strange new threat. It all began with whispers of disturbance not far from the island. In the waters below, strange structures began to rise. Metallic towers, glowing platforms, and machinery that hummed with unnatural energy. The source was unmistakable: Dr. Eggman. He had found yet another plan, another fortress to bend the world to his will. This time, his schemes revolved around a peculiar new machine, one designed to manipulate time and space itself. Knuckles knew that Eggman's inventions always spelled trouble. Left unchecked, such a device could tear apart the delicate balance of the world, and even the Master Emerald's power might not be enough to contain the chaos that followed. And so, Knuckles leapt from his shrine, gliding into the unknown, determined to stop Eggman before disaster struck. But fate had other plans for him. Meeting the Chaotix. Not long after stepping into this new battleground, Knuckles encountered a cast of characters unlike any he had met before. First was Espio, the chameleon, calm, disciplined, and serious. His body shimmered, blending into the environment at will, and his movements were precise, like a ninja gliding through shadow. Then there was Vector the crocodile, loud, brash, and full of energy. His booming voice carried across the battlefield, and though his personality was larger than life, his heart was steady and loyal. Charmy Bee followed soon after, small, buzzing, and endlessly cheerful. His excitement sometimes made him reckless, but his laughter could brighten even the darkest moment. Tar, and finally, Mighty the Armadillo, strong and kind, with fists that could shatter stone, but a spirit gentle enough to comfort a friend. Together, they were the Chaotix. At first, Knuckles was wary. He had always worked alone, trusting no one but himself. His duty was his own, and he carried it silently. But the Chaotix carried themselves with a strange balance of chaos and unity. They bickered, they laughed, they stumbled, yet, when danger arose, they fought as one. Eggman's machines were relentless, and the strange time-warping fortress he had built was unlike anything Knuckles had faced before. But with the Chaotix at his side, the Guardian found himself not alone. The power of unity. The Chaotix had a strange way of fighting. Unlike Sonic and Tails, who raced forward with speed and precision, the Chaotix relied on connection, literally. Their battles were tied together with energy links, binding them as a team, forcing them to rely on one another to overcome obstacles. At first, Knuckles resisted this style. He was used to striking with his fists, gliding on his own strength, climbing walls and breaking through barriers alone. To be tied, even metaphorically, to another felt unnatural. But as battle after battle raged on, Knuckles began to see the value. Espio's agility covered his blind spots. Vector's strength matched his own when heavier machines appeared. Charmy's flight helped them reach places even Knuckles' gliding could not, and Mighty's resilience gave them the anchor they needed when the fight grew overwhelming. For the first time in his life, Knuckles didn't have to carry the weight of a fight alone. Cracks in the fortress. Together, the team pressed deeper into Eggman's strange stronghold, a twisting labyrinth where time bent in odd ways. Platforms appeared and vanished. Pathways shifted as though the fortress itself were alive. It was as though Eggman had bent reality into a puzzle, daring anyone to challenge him. The Chaotix pressed forward regardless, each step breaking down Eggman's control, each battle reminding Knuckles that friendship could be as powerful a weapon as fists. Knuckles still didn't talk much. He never was one for long speeches, but the Chaotix understood him in their own way. Vector would clap him on the back after a fight, laughing at his silence. Charmy would buzz happily, circling him until Knuckles allowed the faintest of smiles. Espio nodded with quiet respect, recognizing the discipline in Knuckles' heart. Mighty, too, shared a bond of strength with him, a mutual respect that required no words at all. A guardian among friends. When at last Eggman's fortress began to crumble under their combined strength, the final battle was fierce. Eggman unleashed his most dangerous machines, twisting the fortress power to distort time itself. But Knuckles and the Chaotix fought with unity. Their strength came not from one hero, but from all of them moving together, trusting each other's instincts. Where one stumbled, another caught them. Where one faltered, another carried on. In the end, Eggman's machine collapsed under the weight of their teamwork. The fortress cracked, its strange energy fading into nothingness, and Eggman fled, vowing as always to return. The Chaotix celebrated with laughter and cheers, their energy bright as the morning sun. Knuckles, standing among them, felt something he hadn't in a long time, a sense of belonging. Chetin. Though his oath tied him always to the Master Emerald, though his life was one of solitude, this adventure had reminded him of something precious. Even guardians need companions from time to time. A gentle goodbye. When the battles were done and the fortress nothing more than a memory, the Chaotix went their separate way. They were adventurers, detectives, wanderers. Their lives were meant to roam, chasing mysteries and laughter wherever they could find them. Knuckles, however, returned to Angel Island, to the shrine, to the endless hum of the Master Emerald. That was his home, his destiny, his vow. And yet, as he stood before the glowing emerald, he felt a little lighter. He knew now that the world was filled with friends who could be called upon when times grew dark, that if Eggman or another threat rose again, he would not face it alone. The Master Emerald glowed softly, its light dancing across the Guardian's calm expression. Knuckles closed his eyes, remembering Vector's booming laugh, Charmy's buzzing joy, Espio's quiet wisdom, and Mighty's steadfast presence. He let out a small breath and smiled. Even a Guardian, he murmured to himself, can have friends. And under the endless sky, Angel Island floated on. The Master Emerald, shining peacefully, watched over not only by a solitary guardian, but by the memory of unity, laughter, and the strange, wonderful team that had once stood by his side. The years rolled gently on like clouds drifting across Angel Island's wide sky. Knuckles kept his watch as always, strong and steady at the shrine, the Master Emerald's glow a constant companion. Yet even the calmest seas can be stirred by new tides, and new faces would come to test not only his strength, but his heart. It began, as many important stories do, with a rumor soft at first, like wind through the leaves, then gathering into a louder scent that something in the world below had shifted. Shimmering gems were moving. Secrets were being whispered. A shadow crossed the horizon, and with it, a figure both graceful and elusive. Rouge the Bat. Rouge was unlike anyone Knuckles had met before. Where he was blunt and rooted like a mountain, she moved like moonlight, smooth, precise, and always with a glimmer of mischief in her eyes. She loved treasure, she loved jewels, and she loved the mystery of them. To her, the Master Emerald was not merely a relic to be protected or worshipped. It was a prize to be admired, studied, and perhaps taken for her own reasons. When Rouge first arrived on Angel Island, she did not storm the shrine with clumsy threats. She arrived in the night, her silhouette slipping across rocks like a shadow slipping past light. Knuckles caught sight of her only because of the faint tinkling of a charm against her attire, the sound of a coin in the deep hush. He launched himself silently from the cliffs and confronted her as she examined a fallen shard, for from time to time even the Master Emerald released tiny pieces, and not all treasures are willingly given. "You shouldn't be here," Knuckles said softly, more surprised than angry. Moonlight painted his spiked knuckles in silver. Rouge smiled, that sly, knowing smile that made it hard to tell whether she was complimenting or conniving. And yet, here I am. Careful, big guy. I'm just admiring the craftsmanship. Knuckles bristled. He had told himself long ago to mistrust outsiders who lingered near the shrine. The past had taught him to be cautious, but there was something different about Rouge, a confidence that was neither cruel nor meek, a carefulness that echoed his own devotion in a curious way. The tension between them unfolded like a slow, ritual dance. Sometimes they clashed over a jewel, a misunderstanding, or a misinterpreted motive. Rouge would slip away, treasures tucked under her wing, and Knuckles would trail after her, not always sure whether he pursued a thief or a kindred spirit. Their encounters were seldom violent. They were games of wit and will. Rouge tested him, teased him, and in doing so, revealed a facet of Knuckles that had been hidden, a tendency to care more than he admitted. It wasn't long before larger dangers surfaced to sweep them both into greater currents. Dr. Eggman, ever restless in his pursuit of power, had designs far beyond petty thefts. Rumors of a mysterious hedgehog, Shadow, the ultimate life form, and of the Ark and its space-bound ambitions drifted into Knuckles' thoughts. The world was growing louder, stranger. The stakes were higher. Knuckles found himself pulled into events that stretched his duty beyond the island. Emeralds went missing, found, stolen again. Players moved like pieces on a wide board. He and Rouge, through a mix of rivalry and reluctant respect, often found their paths crossing in the same puzzles: jewel hunts, traps, and confrontations with Eggman's iron spawn. Where menace grew, cooperation crept in, sometimes reluctantly, sometimes warmly. He said, there was a particular night Knuckles remembered with a softness he rarely allowed himself. He had chased Rouge to a crumbling gondola that hung over the sky, its ropes creaking with age. Below, the clouds churned as if stirred by a restless sea. Rouge was holding a small, perfectly cut emerald she'd just pilfered from a hidden cache. "You'll never understand," she said suddenly, her voice low and serious. It startled Knuckles because she sounded almost apologetic. "Understand what?" he asked. "Why some of us hunt for what's lost," she replied. "There's a history to things, Knuckles. Not everything you protect wants to be kept hidden. Sometimes the world needs its stories retold." Her words, for a moment, settled on him like the hush before snowfall. Knuckles didn't answer. He only looked at the jewel in her hand, and then at the Master Emerald's distant glow. Duty and curiosity tangled like threads in his chest. Their relationship grew complicated in the best ways, like the branches of old trees, sometimes crossing and rubbing, sometimes sheltering one another. Rivalry was still there, a spark that could ignite into a race, a test, or a furious scuffle. But beneath it, trust took root. Knuckles learned that Rouge's motives were not always selfish. Sometimes they were complicated, layered like the facets of a gem that caught light differently from each angle. Meanwhile, the world's troubles deepened. Shadow's arrival, carrying with him questions of memory and purpose, stirred conflicts that reached from the city streets up to the heavens. The Ark's purpose and the existence of the Eclipse Cannon posed threats that could not be solved by fists alone. Knuckles watched as friends, Sonic, Tails, and even occasional allies like Rouge were drawn into struggles that demanded more than speed or strength. They demanded choices. Knuckles found himself in the thick of it, not because he sought glory, but because he could not stand aside while the balance he protected teetered. He punched through Eggman's machines, tore panels from rusted hulls, and in quieter moments, worked with Rouge to retrieve emeralds or disable traps. She would slip into places where brute force would do nothing but break the wrong thing. He would smash through walls that hideaway thieves might use. Together, they were a pair of edges that fit when needed. There were moments of near tragedy that left him hollow and small. He watched as the Ark's plans unfolded. He felt the terror in the city as machines rose and the skies threatened. But in those hard hours, people showed him what loyalty could be. Sonic, glowing with the light of emeralds, fought with a brilliance Knuckles both admired and envied. Rouge, for all her treasure hunting, acted with a bravery that surprised him. Even Shadow, though distant and tragic, showed a depth of purpose that tugged at the heart. When it was all said and done, when choices were made and battles fought, Knuckles stood on the high ridge by the shrine and let the night wash over him. The Master Emerald's light steadied the world once more. The island breathed a slow, easy breath. Rouge came to stand beside him, not to steal or to test, but perhaps to simply be. They watched the sky in companionable silence. The rivalry that had once been like sharp stones between them was now more like a path worn into the earth, familiar, traveled, and oddly reassuring. "You did okay," Rouge said at last, her tone breezy but not unkind. Knuckles grunted a little, the sound of an echidna unused to praise. So did you. They did not become best friends that night, nor did they erase every quarrel or misunderstanding. But something softer settled between them, an understanding that some things are worth protecting, and that sometimes protection looks like standing together, rather than apart. In the quiet that followed, Knuckles reflected on the strange, winding road his life had taken. He had started as a solitary guardian, anchored to tradition and vigilance. Over the years, he had met heroes and rogues, rivals and companions. Sonic had taught him the bright, fast warmth of friendship. Tails had shown him the patience of ingenuity. The Chaotix taught him the power of unity, and Rouge taught him that the world's stories are often complicated and worth listening to. As Angel Island drifted on, Knuckles resumed his watch at the shrine, the Master Emerald glowing like a steady heartbeat. He stood a little taller, perhaps, and his guard was still taught duty does not sleep, but his spirit had room now for connection, for laughter between duels, for a playful shove at a rival who had become, in her own sly way, a kind of friend. And above the clouds, under the same scattered stars that had seen his tribe rise and fall long ago, Knuckles felt the gentle truth like a hand on his shoulder. Being a guardian did not require him to be alone. It merely asked that he be true to the Emerald, to his oath, and, sometimes, to the unexpected bonds that make the nights less cold and the dawns a little brighter. The world had grown broader still. Knuckles had learned the taste of travel and the warmth of friendship, and though Angel Island remained his true home, new paths kept unfolding beneath his feet. One of those paths led him to a time when heroes gathered as teams, when races of speed and strength met in grand contests, and when dangers called for more than one kind of courage at once. It was the season of the great tournaments and strange alliances, a time when multiple threats rose in different corners of the world, each with a strange echo of energy that told of machines and malice. Dr. Eggman, ever inventive in his ambition, had found new ways to tangle the world in gears. Powerful relics were stirred, and old enemies found new partners. Battles were no longer single duels, they were sweeping challenges that would test teams of friends. Sonic's grin was ready for it, and Tails' gears were eager to turn. But this time they found themselves joined not only by each other, but by other brave souls who each brought their own light. Knuckles, with his steadfast resolve, naturally fit into this new shape of adventure. He was not just the guardian of one jewel anymore. He was a member of something larger, a team that moved together like a single heartbeat. In those days, teams formed like constellations across the sky. Sometimes they were odd pairs, sometimes trios that balanced one another like stones in a cairn. The point was not only to fight, but to learn how different strengths could find their place in a shared rhythm. Knuckles' role was familiar and new at once. His fists could clear a path, his knowledge could reveal a hidden hall, and his loyalty could steady even the most impulsive heart. One of the brightest memories from that time was the way Knuckles found himself working seamlessly with Sonic and Tails in challenges that mixed speed, puzzles, and raw force, where Sonic blurred like lightning through open corridors and Tails skimmed the air, fixing contraptions and wiring pathways. Knuckles was the wall that nothing could easily break. He would anchor a collapsing bridge with one huge punch, or he would pluck a mechanism free from the earth and toss it aside so his friends could run through. His presence felt like a promise. I will take the front so you may pass. Yet it wasn't all work. There were quiet moments too when the trio rested under a slant of sun or shared food near a low fire. They joked about races that turned into cozy naps, and Knuckles discovered that laughter, like training, could be a kind of strength. He learned to chase Sonic not only to stop him from being reckless, but because the races sharpened them both. Tails' inventions amazed him, and the way the fox trusted Sonic taught Knuckles to be less suspicious of the world's kindness. The biggest trials of those days were not merely machines with claws and teeth. They were the moments when the team was asked to trust one another with more than tasks, to trust them with the outcomes of others' choices and the consequences of risky moves. It required patience, restraint, and sometimes stepping back to let another lead. Knuckles learned that a guardian's job was not always to be the first to strike. Sometimes it was to be the last to stand, a bulwark that allowed others to shine. When their final challenges came great arenas of clockwork and light, platforms spinning over roiling seas, and mazes alive with the hum of ancient magic, the team moved in a kind of dance that was both practiced and impulsive. Knuckles smashed through gates, Sonic darted through gaps with gleaming speed, and Tails patched pathways in the middle of running rivers. They were stronger together than the sum of their parts because each trusted the other to do what they did best. When victory came, it was quiet and warm, like water returning to a shallow pool. The machines quieted. The trophies were not what mattered most. Rather, it was the knowing that each had kept the other's back. For Knuckles, that thought settled under his ribs like settling stones, steady, solid. Good. He returned to the shrine with a new kind of calm. He was still a guardian, but he was also a comrade, a member of a circle whose strength didn't erode when the world pushed harshly at the edges. Sometimes, on cool nights when the Master Emerald reflected the moon in a perfect silver green, Knuckles thought of those rounds and races. He imagined the teams scattered across the globe, leading lives of their own but connected by the memory of shared battle. The world, he realized, was full of people who would stand beside him if ever the island needed more hands. That was a comfort he hadn't realized he needed until he had it. And so, through the seasons, Knuckles remained, guardian, friend, and quietly grateful participant in a larger story. When tides turned and new storms approached, he walked to the front, not because he had to, but because he wanted to stand with those who had become a family in the broad sense. It was a gentle truth. A single heart might be steadfast, but many hearts make a refuge. A life lived as a guardian and a traveler is naturally full of encounters, some gentle, some testing, some playful. Knuckles' path wound through many such meetings, and over time a series of rivalries etched themselves into his life. But rivalry, in Knuckles' world, was rarely simple hostility. It was a pattern of challenge that taught patience, respect, and, sometimes, love. A primary and most enduring rivalry was with Rouge the Bat. Where Knuckles was solid and rooted, Rouge was mercurial and curious. Their clashes were colored by mystery jewels that blinked under moonlight, whispered bargains, and rooftop chases across silent cities. It began with thefts and escapes, but it grew into something softer, mutual understanding. Knuckles learned to read the subtle shift in Rouge's eyes, the touch that meant she would step back where danger was more than thrill. Rouge learned that beneath Knuckles' gruff exterior was a protector of things that mattered more than anyone else's treasures. Then there was Shadow, whose brooding nature and tragic past complicated every encounter he had with Knuckles. Shadow's motivations were often somber and deep, his loyalties wrapped in secrecy and fate. When their paths crossed, it was rarely a simple fight. Instead, Knuckles faced the challenge of listening, really listening to another being's grief and choice. Shadow's presence taught Knuckles empathy, that sometimes the fiercest battles were fought inward, and that one did not always need to deliver a final blow to understand someone else's pain. Sonic remained a unique rival, not an enemy, but a standard. Sonic's speed became a measure and a mirror that Knuckles would use to push himself. Their races were friendly, bruising, and honest. Knuckles punched harder when Sonic teased him, and Sonic dulled his braggadocio when Knuckles' determination shone. Between them existed a camaraderie that made both better. Sonic tempered Knuckles' suspicion with laughter, and Knuckles steadied Sonic's wandering heart with a touchstone of duty. Not all rivalries were with heroes. Eggman, of course, was perpetual opposition. The Doctor's inventions, plans, and betrayals required Knuckles to be unyielding. But even then, their relationship was less about hatred and more about necessary vigilance. Eggman's plots forced Knuckles to sharpen his skills, to adapt, and to be thoughtful in ways rooted in experience. Without such challenges, the Guardian would never find the edges of his own strength. There were also small, light rivalries that made life warm. Knuckles sparred with friends over tasks, from who could gather fruit fastest to who could clear the most rocks in a day. The Chaotix would tease him, throwing good-natured jabs until even Knuckles laughed. Tails and Knuckles found themselves in a friendly tug-of-war over inventions. Tails' gadgets often baffled Knuckles, but the two shared a mutual respect based on skill and trust. Each rivalry refined him. They took him from single-mindedness to a richer palette of emotions and interactions. Where once he might have seen a stranger as merely a potential threat, Knuckles learned to question, to listen, to test, then to trust. Rivalries became a language not of war, but of honest measurement. They tested his patience and taught him how to accept loss, how to celebrate another's success without feeling lessened, and how to stand steady when the world demanded resilience. Perhaps the most beautiful thing about these contests was how they softened the endings. Rivalries that began with suspicion often cooled into companionship. It wasn't always quick or easy. It required time, shared hardships, and sometimes the willingness to be wrong. Knuckles discovered that admitting error was not a weakness, and that a rivalry ending in a handshake or a shared joke was more valuable than an empty victory. On quiet nights, Knuckles would think of all the faces that had once rushed toward him as potential enemies, but who now flashed smiles across training fields, perched on cliffs, or sprinted into the horizon. Rivalries had taught him to be vigilant, but also to love to care for the world, not because it demanded it, but because it was worth protecting, and to treasure the odd, exasperating, wonderful people who made life fuller. If a guardian's life is measured by duties, then a hero's journey can be measured by the stories that wander into unexpected places. Knuckles' tale did not stay confined to Angel Island, or even to the main battles he fought. It spread into many smaller stories and cameos, each a little window into a different shade of his character. These appearances were like postcards from travels brief, bright, and telling. There were times when Knuckles surfed strange skies on boards of technology in high-speed races. Times when he tested his strength in tournaments that combined both physical prowess and heart. Times when he stepped into stories that felt like fairy tales, small arcs in which his stubborn courage was a lighthouse for others. Each spin-off was a soft chord that added to the larger song of his life. In racing worlds, Knuckles learned new ways to move. He discovered that strength could be graceful, that leading a charge could mean guiding a team through tricky turns as much as it meant smashing obstacles. He learned to read courses like maps, feeling the wind's pull at his back and the slope under his feet. In those moments, he was not only a guardian, but a competitor who loved the clean lines of a race and the quiet thrill of near-missed turns. In fighting arenas, Knuckles found camaraderie through contest. His fists, which had once only smashed to protect, learned to spin and parry with rhythm and discipline. He respected foes who fought with skill and kindness, and even in defeat, he discovered that he could stand taller because of what he had learned. These matches were lessons in humility and practice reminders that even power needed direction and care. Knuckles' cameo moments sometimes asked him to be a mentor. In quieter tales, younger characters looked to him for guidance. He would teach them not only how to punch with precision, but when to use that punch. He taught them the stories of his tribe as parables, not to frighten, but to warn against greed and to inspire responsibility. He showed them that duty could be chosen, not merely enforced, and that protecting something precious is an act of love rather than simple command. There were playful cameos too, holiday episodes where Knuckles begrudgingly joined in festivities, grumbling about loud music but staying to help string lights. Short adventures where he had to rely on trickery rather than strength, discovering that wit could be as useful as muscle. These small stories revealed softness, a laugh hidden behind a clenched jaw, a fondness for a certain quiet corner of the island, and a love for the small creatures that lived near the shrine. Sometimes, other worlds asked him to step into serious roles, defending entire regions from storms of metal, searching for relics that weren't intended to be found, and facing versions of himself in dreams that required introspection. These mirrors were difficult. They forced Knuckles to ask uncomfortable questions about who he was beyond his fists and vows. They taught him compassion, patience, and the value of listening to himself and others. Across all these spin-offs and cameos, one thread remained constant: Knuckles' devotion. Whether he was racing in distant skies, sparring in glowing arenas, or quietly advising a nervous youth, he carried the same heart. He guarded what needed guarding, he laughed where laughter fit, and he forgave when forgiveness was the bravest path. And when the brief adventure ended after wins and losses, laughs and lessons, he would find himself back at the shrine. The Master Emerald would glow, welcoming him like an old friend. He would rest a hand upon its surface and feel the ancient hum settle into his bones. The world would spin on, full of stories, and he would take his place among them, a steady presence, the way mountains are steady, the way rivers are patient. In the long quiet after many trials, Knuckles understood something simply and beautifully. Heroes can be many things. They can be solitary, they can be team players, they can be fierce and tender, stubborn and wise. They can appear in many stories, but what makes them true is not the battles they fight, but the reasons they stand: love, duty, and the quiet courage to keep watch when others sleep. And so, as Angel Island drifted on and the stars traced their patterns above, Knuckles the Echidna continued his vigil, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends, always steady. His life overflowed with small adventures and grand moments alike, each one adding a gentle layer to the story that would keep him company on long nights and carry him forward with calm, steady steps. Knuckles the Echidna is many things at once: mountain strong and quietly tender, stubborn yet capable of surprising softness. If you were to meet him on a cool morning at the shrine, you might first notice the way he stands: shoulders squared, fists ready, eyes watchful. That is his armor, fashioned from years of duty and from a history that taught him vigilance. But beneath that exterior is a shape of character that has depth and warmth. Shar. At the heart of Knuckles is loyalty. It's a simple word, but it carries a weight that touches all he does. Loyalty for him is not merely allegiance to a title. It is the steady beat that guides his choices. When he says he will protect the Master Emerald, he means it as a promise, a kind of unspoken contract that shapes every morning and every night. Loyalty extends beyond rocks and relics. It reaches to friends who have once earned his trust. He will stand with them without question when danger rises, and his actions speak louder than any speech could. Next is bravery, but not the loud, boastful kind. Knuckles' courage is measured and reliable. He does not rush into harm because he seeks glory. He moves because others cannot afford the cost of delay. When the island trembles and alarms ring out, Knuckles does not consider whether he is frightened. He acts. That quiet courage is like a lamp in a storm, steady, ordinary, indispensable. There is also stubbornness, a trait that can both bless and burden him. It is the spike that keeps him focused, unwilling to yield when a task is unfinished. But stubbornness can also close doors. In his early days, it made him slow to trust, quick to judge, and sometimes prone to mistakes born of conviction rather than understanding. Over time, his stubbornness has softened into determination, a determination that can listen, that is willing to bend when wisdom suggests another path. Knuckles is straightforward, with a mind that prefers action to argument. He values clarity. If a problem exists, he wants to see it solved. If a friend is in need, he wants to help. He is not one for long speeches or riddled plans. Tell him plainly what must be done, and he will do it with a strength that is both physical and moral. There is an honesty about him that people come to trust. What you see is what you get, and what you get is dependable. Underneath his strong hands is a soft patience for the things he loves. He cares for the island's small creatures, watching Chow play with an uncharacteristic gentleness. He remembers the tales carved into the shrine stones and treats them like lessons rather than burdens. There is an attention in him that is almost tender. He notices little changes in the environment and in the people who come to the island. This attentiveness is the quiet side of his guardianship. Legend. Knuckles also carries a sense of honor. Even when angry or wronged, he measures himself against an internal code. This code has roots in the legacy of his tribe, the etched murals, the stories of Tikal, and the warnings that echo through the shrine. He honors those lessons by choosing restraint when it is needed, by seeking balance rather than dominance, and by protecting the weak without seeking reward. Honor keeps his feet on the ground, when pride could push him toward ruin. He is not without flaws. His naivete at times will catch him off guard. When others twist words or weave clever deceptions, he may be slow to see the trap. That was how Eggman tricked him once, and that memory is both chastening and instructive. But Knuckles learns. His errors do not define him as much as his response to them does. He grows by admitting fault, by correcting course, and by letting others help him see new perspectives. Knuckles' humor is quiet and dry. He isn't one to laugh loudly or often, but he will let a small, reluctant grin slip out in good company. He appreciates simple jokes and the warmth of a campfire conversation after a long day. Laughter for him is not frivolous. It is a sign of life continuing despite the trials that press against it. Finally, there is compassion. It does not always show in grand gestures. More often, it appears in small ways. Patting a chow, sharing a piece of fruit, standing guard through the night while someone else rests. Knuckles cares without fanfare. His presence alone can be a comfort. That steadiness is its own kind of kindness. Put all these traits together, and you have a guardian who is complex and real. He is a living paradox, tough enough to protect entire islands and soft enough to tend to the smallest creatures. He is stubborn, yes, but he is also willing to learn. He values solitude, yet he has a heart that opens to friendship. These contrasts make him interesting and, more importantly, human in his own echidna way. In the hush of Angel Island, they make him a figure both formidable and dear, a protector whose faults are as instructive as his strengths and whose life is a lesson in courage shaped by kindness. Knuckles' life is often described in terms of duty and solitude, but a quiet truth threaded through his years is the number of bonds he formed, friendships that taught him as much as any carved mural or ancient warning. These are relationships that grew slowly, like vines over stones, and each one softened the island's silence in its own way. At the center of these bonds is Sonic, the hedgehog whose speed is matched only by his big-heartedness. Their first meeting was rocky. Mistrust and tricks led to clashes, but that rough beginning paved the way for a resilient friendship. Sonic's laughter and unbothered courage chipped away at Knuckles' guard. Sonic taught him that speed could be a gift shared, and that forgiving mistakes could build bridges stronger than anger. Their rivalry became a language of its own. Races turned into lessons, and arguments into shared jokes. Beneath the teasing lay trust. They learned to cover each other's weaknesses and to celebrate strengths together. Knuckles values Sonic not just as an ally in battle, but as a friend who keeps life light when duty presses heavy. Tails, the soft-spoken fox, offered something different, a gentle intelligence that softened Knuckles' rougher edges. Tails' curiosity and inventiveness offered solutions where force alone would fail. He taught Knuckles to see that ingenuity and patience could be as powerful as a crushing blow. In return, Knuckles gave Tails confidence, his quiet approval a kind of validation for the young fox's brilliant mind. Their friendship is subtle, expressed in shared silences while fixing machines, or in the simple comfort of knowing another will be there when night comes. Then there is Rouge, who began as a mysterious figure drawn to jewels and secrets. Her relationship with Knuckles is complicated and beautifully human. What began as rivalry for the Master Emerald transformed into a kinship of contradictions, absent-minded teasing, grudging respect, and protective instincts that sometimes cross into tenderness. Rouge showed Knuckles that not all seekers of treasure are mercenary. Some are historians, collectors of stories, and guardians of memory in their own way. They clash, they bicker, but they also stand together when stakes are highest. This odd friendship taught Knuckles to read beyond a person's surface and to find value in motives that are not immediately obvious. The Chaotix, Espio, Vector, Charmy, and Mighty brought yet another texture to Knuckles' life. Their camaraderie was messy and warm, loud laughter from Vector, Charmy's reckless joy, Espio's steady presence, and Mighty's gentle strength. With them, Knuckles experienced the sweetness of belonging to a group where personalities could clash and still come away smiling. They taught him how to share burdens and how play could be a form of repair after hardship. Their teamwork showed Knuckles a practical truth. When many hands reach toward a problem, the weight becomes shared and lighter to bear. Knuckles also learned from more complicated bonds, friends whose motives were not always simple. Shadow entered his life as a study in solemn purpose. Sharing ground with Shadow allowed Knuckles to see that pain and isolation can shape noble intentions. Shadow's quiet resolve and heavy past taught Knuckles empathy, that sometimes the bravest act is listening without judgment. By sharing hardships and choices with Shadow, Knuckles discovered that friendship can exist even when two hearts move at different paces. Beyond these close companions, Knuckles found smaller, tender relationships that mattered. The Chow who danced near the shrine, the island's birds that nested in high ledges, and even the quiet, grateful nods of travelers who learned of his watch. Each small connection was a stitch in a larger tapestry, subtle but binding. What these bonds share is their reciprocity. Knuckles does not take friends lightly. He can be slow to trust, but when he gives his loyalty, it is whole. He shows up in ways that are unmistakable, standing guard through the night, offering strength when tasks grow heavy, and swinging a punch where action is needed most. His friends repay him not only in camaraderie but in patience, teaching him to unbend, to joke, and to rest. The deeper lesson in Knuckles' friendships is that they made him more than a solitary guardian. They taught him balance, between solitude and community, between duty and joy, between silence and laughter. Where once he was an island unto himself, he became part of an archipelago. Individual but connected, each rock and reef linked by tides of shared memory and mutual care. In the hush before dawn on Angel Island, Knuckles sometimes thinks of his friends scattered across the world, some racing, some inventing, some guarding their own small corners. He smiles quietly, not one to say it often, but grateful nonetheless. For a guardian who once believed his purpose required absolute isolation, the gift of these bonds was a revelation. Protection is more complete when shared, and solitude is gentler when dotted with returning footsteps of friends. To speak of Knuckles' duty is to speak of a steady heartbeat beneath the hush of Angel Island, a rhythm that keeps cliffs safe, waterfalls singing, and the green glow of the Master Emerald alive. His duty is a simple, profound thing: to guard the emerald, to protect balance, to stand when others sleep. Yet within that simplicity are layers of meaning, choices, and gentle courage. Guardianship is not always a grand gesture. Many of Knuckles' days are filled with quiet rituals, morning patrols along fog-draped ridges, checking the seals of ancient walls, listening for the smallest disturbances that could presage danger. Now, this attentiveness is a practice of love. It is not mechanical. He does these things because something in him has decided that some things are worth preserving, regardless of reward or acclaim. It is a lonely calling sometimes. There were days when the wind seemed too empty, when the absence of other voices pressed like a weight. But Knuckles learned to carry those moments like teachable stones. Hard, yes, but useful to smooth and polish one's edges. He found solace in routine, in the hush of night, in the songs of invisible birds, and in the soft hum of the Master Emerald that reminded him why he stayed. Responsibility shaped more than actions. It formed identity. Knuckles does not separate who he is from what he does. Being a guardian is not a job you do and then leave at the door. It is a life one lives. That integration meant sacrifices, missed adventures, decades of solitude, and the sometimes bitter taste of being misunderstood. Yet these sacrifices also gave him clarity. The world's safety took precedence, and within that priority, he found meaning. Still, duty without wisdom can become rigid. Knuckles understood this through trials in the company he kept. He learned to temper uncompromising vigilance with counsel from friends, from the soft wisdom of Tails and the brash integrities of Sonic, from the chaotic's willingness to work as one. Guardianship, he realized, was not simply about guarding alone. It was about choosing rightly when to ask for help, when to trust, and when to step back and see the broader picture. Over the years, his role expanded beyond physical defense to include stewardship of memory. The Master Emerald was not only a source of power, it was a repository of stories. of Tikal's sacrifice, of the tribe's rise and fall, of lessons learned in fire and sorrow. Knuckles became a living curator of those stories, reminding the world of consequences and the cost of greed. He would often sit at the shrine and recount, if only to himself, the carved scenes on its walls, a quiet ritual that kept those voices alive. There were also moments when the duty asked not for force, but for mercy. Not all threats could be beaten with fists. Sometimes the most courageous act was to listen, to understand a wrong path, and to offer a hand toward change. Knuckles learned to balance firmness with compassion, to recognize when punishment would preserve nothing, and when education and forgiveness might heal more effectively. These moments taught him that guardianship is as much about cultivating peace as it is about defending against chaos. In the quiet stretches between crises, Knuckles honed his spirit. He trained not only his body but his mind. He practiced patience like a craft, finding ways to center himself. A climb at dawn, a slow walk through the island's gardens, tending to Chow in the soft shade. These small acts were part devotion and part refuge. They kept him anchored to the softer parts of life that might otherwise be lost in perpetual vigilance. Despite the weight of this role, Knuckles did not become embittered. Often he felt gratitude. Gratitude for the island that trusted him, for the friendships that softened his edges, and for the chance to stand for something larger than himself. His duty gave him perspective. It taught him endurance and the quiet joy of a job well done. As the island drifted under a vault of stars, Knuckles sometimes allowed himself to imagine a future soft with welcome, chasing the horizon with Sonic for a day, lending a hand in Tails' latest invention, or sharing a quiet joke with Rouge. Then he would look at the Master Emerald and remember that his place was here, at least for as long as the island needed a guardian. He would not pretend immortality. Guardianship is a passing flame that must find new keepers someday. But he took comfort in the notion that the lessons he carried, the humility of Tikal, the forgiveness he learned from friends, the value of listening, would outlast him. Perhaps someday, a new guardian would rise with those lessons in their heart. Until that day, he would keep watch. He would patrol the cliffs, mend old walls, and listen for the whisper that might herald trouble. He would stand, unflinching, in the face of storms, driven by a love that had become his identity. For Knuckles, guarding the Master Emerald was not merely a task. It was the expression of a life lived in service to balance, to memory, and to the quiet good that keeps the world turning. And when night fell and the island stilled, Knuckles would sit before the glowing emerald, placing a palm against its cool surface. He would close his eyes and breathe in the steady hum, and in that calm, he would feel the truth of all he had done, that being a guardian was not a burden he carried alone, but a light he kept so others might sleep safely beneath it. Night settles softly over Angel Island, like a familiar blanket draped across old stones and high cliffs. The Master Emerald glows with its steady, patient light, casting a gentle green shimmer over the shrine and the trees that bend their heads in the breeze. Down below, the sea breathes in slow, rhythmic waves. Above, the stars wheel in their quiet procession. All is calm. Knuckles sits once more at the emerald's side, the same way he began. Strong hands folded, eyes softened by reflection. The long road of his life of duty and mistakes, of rivalries and laughter, of lonely watches and shared battles, has led him here, at the center of everything he vowed to protect. Tonight, the island seems to whisper in a language he knows by heart. Stories of the past, murmurs of the present, and a hush of hopes for the future. He thinks of Tikal's soft courage, of Pachacamac's rage turned to warning, of days when his tribe filled the island with voices that are now only carvings and echoes. He remembers the feel of the Master Emerald, how its light can steady a racing heart and calm a restless mind. He remembers being tricked, the sting of error, and the slow mending that followed when friends forgave him and drew him back into the world. Sonic's laughter rises in memory like a warm wind, Tails' thoughtful tinkering, Rouge's crooked smile that hides more compassion than she admits. The Chaotix's unruly joy, all of them are threads woven into Knuckles' life, each stitch making the pattern stronger. Shadow's silent burden, Eggman's persistent schemes, moments of fear and triumph, each has carved him as surely as any lesson at the shrine. Guardianship, he has learned, is not only about holding a stone in place. It is about holding a story in safekeeping. It is about remembering what happened, so the same mistakes do not bloom again. It is about being ready when the night turns sharp and the winds bring machines or men with plans that would harm. But it is also about laughter and shared meals and hands that reach out when the work is done. For Knuckles, the two duty and fellowship fit together like rock and root. Tonight he allows himself to be small and full. He thinks of the Chow that play near the tree roots, their tiny faces bright and trusting. He thinks of children he might have never known, of young guardians someday reading the carved warnings on the shrine and hearing the stories he keeps alive. He imagines, perhaps foolishly, perhaps tenderly, that one day the island will have more voices again, not as echoes, but as living songs. He traces the emerald's cool rim with his fingertips, feeling the pulse beneath the surface. It is steady. It is ancient. It is both a gift and a vow. He closes his eyes and breathes in the hush, the rustle of leaves, the soft drip of distant waterfalls, the faint laughter of friends somewhere beyond the clouds. He is both a keeper of stones and a keeper of peace. For all its weight, his duty has given him a kind of grace. The solitude that once felt like an iron chain has been softened by the presence of others, by trust earned, by races run and won, by hands clasped in the heat of battle, and by those quiet moments after the last robot falls and the world exhales. Knuckles wears these memories like a cloak. They keep him warm. As the night deepens, the island glows a little brighter in places where small lights flicker, lanterns left by passing travelers, the tiny embers of campfires in hidden coves, the soft lamp of tales tinkering in a distant workshop. Each light is a reminder that the world below is awake with life, with stories unfolding that sometimes call him to leave and sometimes send friends to stay. The world is larger than his watch, but his watch reaches into it. He thinks, too, of the future, not as a distant, fearful thing, but as something being quietly shaped by choices made tonight. A choice to forgive, a choice to stand, a choice to teach, a choice to listen. The lessons of Tikal and the mistakes of the tribe are not wasted. They are seeds for prudence and care in those who will come after. He will tell the stories, he will show the carvings, he will pass on the quiet wisdom of a life spent guarding not simply a gem, but a balance. Knuckles rises and walks to the cliff's edge, the clouds parting like curtains to reveal a moon that is full and kind. The air tastes of salt and green things, like a lullaby for the brave. For a breath, he lets himself imagine running with Sonic along the shoreline, or tinkering alongside Tails, or sharing a quiet joke with Rouge until dawn. Then he smiles, small, content, and turns back toward the shrine. He lays a hand on the emerald one last time before sleep calls him. "Rest easy," he murmurs, not to the stone alone, but to the island, to the world, to the friends who sleep beneath the same sky. "I'm watching. I'll be here." And then, with the steady that only comes from knowing your place in the great turning, Knuckles settles down. The wind hums a low tune. A Chow burbles in the dark. The Master Emerald glows, a small, sacred heart in the hush. If you close your eyes now, you might imagine the island drifting gently through night, the Guardian breathing in calm, the Emerald safe and sure. You might picture the soft sound of waves below and the distant echo of laughter from friends who roam and will return. You might feel for a moment the warm steadiness of trust, the promise that someone keeps watch while you sleep. Good night, then, from Angel Island. Rest with the knowledge that somewhere in the sky a guardian stands, steady and kind. The emerald is safe, the island dreams, and tomorrow the sun will rise on a world kept in balance, because someone, somewhere, keeps watch. Sleep well.